She wasn't supposed to fight. No weapon, no orders, just a clipboard and a seat on the ridge. Yet when the radios went silent and even hardened SEALs began lowering their rifles in surrender, she did the unthinkable. Alone, she walked straight into the kill zone, a place that had already swallowed entire squads and made every shot matter. Before we dive into what happened that day, make sure you're locked in, because this story isn't just about war. It's about courage hidden in plain sight, and the woman who proved that sometimes the most dangerous person is the one no one sees coming. The desert air at FOB Halverson carried the weight of exhaustion diesel fumes, mixed with dust and the unspoken truth that this place had already cost too many lives. Prefab walls sagged under the sun razor wire, patched again and again, as if everyone knew the base wasn't built to last. Lieutenant Commander Ardan Rusk stepped off the transport helicopter with quiet precision, the kind that came from years of injuries learned and endured. Mid-40s ordinary in appearance, her brown hair tied back tight, her uniform clean, but not pampered. She carried just one duffel and a clipboard so worn it looked like it had survived more battles than most soldiers. While others shielded their faces from the rotor wash, she didn't flinch. She simply stood still, eyes fixed on the horizon, calm where everyone else moved with urgency. That silence unsettled people. Chief Blake, Maris's SEAL, hardened by 4 deployments, watched her approach with irritation. At 38, he carried himself with the aggression of a man who had survived by expecting trouble every single day. To him, she looked like dead weight, a logistics officer sent to observe in one of the deadliest zones in Afghanistan. Santos, his right hand, spat into the dust. Brass wants us to babysit her. She's here to assess operational efficiency. Both men glanced at the eastern ridge, the place they called the Scar, a natural bowl of rock and shadow that had been swallowing American lives for 6 months. 3 SEAL teams had entered. Pieces of 2 had crawled out. The rest, still down there, marked only by silent GPS coordinates. Rusk finally stopped a few paces away, her tone calm, her words clipped. "Chief Maris." "You're the observer," he replied, unimpressed. "I'm here to assess operations in hostile terrain," she said, eyes flicking toward the ridge. "I understand you've had some challenges." Santos gave a dark laugh. "That's one word for it." Maris cut him off with a look, then turned back to her. "Ma'am, with respect, the Scar isn't a place where observers survive long enough to file reports." Something flickered across Rusk's face, not fear, not offense. Just recognition, as if she'd heard the same warning in another life. She answered evenly, "Then it should be an interesting assessment." Inside the Tactical Operations Center, the air was heavy with silence. Maps lined the walls, each marked with red X's, losses no one dared read twice. It felt less like a briefing and more like a funeral waiting to begin. Chief Maris stood at the front, pointing at satellite imagery of the Scar. Grid reference 47. Charlie. Natural depression, roughly 800 meters across. Steep approaches, no confirmed structures, no visible defenses. But 3 teams went in. Bravo lost 4 men. Delta lost 5. Echo? His voice trailed off. Everyone knew Echo hadn't come back. In the back, Rusk sat quietly, clipboard, balanced on her knees. She hadn't asked a single question in 40 minutes. She just wrote in neat, precise handwriting, her eyes following every contour line and elevation marker on the map, as if she were reading a language no one else understood. When casualty numbers were mentioned, her pen paused for just a second, less surprise, more recognition. Maris pressed on. "The enemy uses the terrain against us. Natural funnels, overlapping fire zones, perfect concealment. They see us long before we see them." Kumar, the comms specialist, raised his hand. "What about air support? An AC-130 could level the valley." Maris shook his head. "Rules of engagement require positive ID. And we've still got 2 missing operators, Martinez and Chen. Their beacons went dark 3 days ago. Last words we got were, 'Movement in the rocks. Can't see where it's coming from.' No airstrikes until we confirm their status." The room went still. Everyone knew what that meant. Martinez and Chen were bait held to lure more SEALs into a trap. That's when Rusk finally looked up. Her voice was calm, her question unexpected. "What's the prevailing wind direction in the target area?" The operators exchanged confused glances. Wind. Nobody cared about wind. But Kumar checked his tablet. Southeast to northwest, updrafts during the day, downdrafts at night. Why Rusk only made another note pen scratching with mechanical certainty. Just trying to understand the variables. Maris studied her more closely now. It wasn't the question itself, it was the way she asked it. Like she already knew the answer and was testing if anyone else did. For the first time, he wondered if this quiet woman with a clipboard was not at all what she seemed. While the SEALs traded tense looks in the briefing room, Rusk's pen moved like a metronome. But beneath her stillness, memories flickered. Afghanistan wasn't her first valley of death. She had been in South America once, operations that didn't appear on any official record. A convoy ambushed in a jungle pass, radios gone, allies scattered. She remembered the metallic tang of blood in the rain, the echo of distant screams. She had been logistics then too until it became clear logistics would not save anyone. That night she learned that supply chains could run on violence just as easily as on fuel and rations. Another time a desert far to the west. Sandstorms so thick you couldn't see your own boots. She had been tasked with assessment. By dawn, assessment meant deciding which of her men would carry rifles and which would carry stretchers. Every decision weighed like a stone she never put down. The scar wasn't new. It was just another stanza in a song she had learned long ago, a song of traps, impossible odds, and the simple, merciless fact that survival favored those who adapted first. So when she asked about the wind, it wasn't curiosity. It was instinct. The air told stories, how bullets would drift, how dust would cover movement, how sound would travel. And Rusk had lived long enough to know that terrain and wind could kill just as quickly as bullets. She wrote down the answer, eyes steady, but inside her old ghosts stirred, and they whispered the same refrain. Don't wait for rescue. Be the rescue. The ritual before a mission into the scar had become grimly routine. Letters folded inside lockers. Voice recordings saved on secure drives. Photos turned face down on bunks. Each man prepared to fight, but also prepared to be silenced. Echo Squad's gear was lined up like surgical instruments. Rifles cleaned, optics zeroed, ammo checked and rechecked. Radios tested, batteries swapped, then tested again. 3 different sign-offs for every piece of equipment. Nobody wanted a mistake to be the reason they didn't come back. Maris walked the line with practiced eyes. Comm check every 15 minutes, no exceptions. Maintain visual contact at all times. Nobody moves alone. His words were flat but heavy. Everyone knew this wasn't just protocol, it was survival. Then came the question from Kowalski, the medic. What about the observer? She's staying on the ridge. That's the plan, Maris said, though. His tone made it sound more like hope. But when Rusk appeared in the doorway, she wasn't carrying her battered clipboard. Instead, she had a small rucksack strapped tight, and her uniform looked less like administrative fabric and more like gear built for the field. She carried herself differently, too. Less like a bureaucrat, more like someone who had walked into danger before. Santos caught it first. Ma'am, you planning to come with us? I'll be observing, she said evenly. From the optimal vantage point. Maris frowned. With respect, ma'am, optimal for observation isn't optimal for survival. The scar makes observers into casualties. Her eyes met his. Calm, unwavering. Then I'll try not to get in your way. There was no arrogance, no bravado, just certainty. Enough that Maris felt the ground shift under him. You have a weapon, he asked. I have what I need. No explanation. By Ouro's 700 hours, the convoy rolled out armored vehicles, grinding across a landscape that looked unfinished raw stone in jagged scrub under an unforgiving sun. Rusk sat in the passenger seat of the Humvee, her rucksack at her feet. She didn't speak. She just watched shadows shifting dustbirds in sudden flight like someone who knew that missing details could get you killed. As they neared the scar, the chatter died. No jokes, no complaints. Just the clipped language of professionals heading into a place that had already consumed too many of their own. At the ridge, Maris halted the convoy. Vehicles formed a defensive perimeter, and the squad prepared to descend. Below them, the scar yawned like an open wound, silent, merciless, already holding more American dead than anyone wanted to admit. Maris turned to Rusk. Observer stays here. We'll report every 15 minutes. She nodded and took her position behind an outcropping of rock, binoculars in hand, scanning with a precision that suggested she wasn't seeing this place for the first time. And then Echo Squad began their descent into the valley that had already claimed 3 teams. 15 minutes into the descent, the first comms check came through clear. Echo 1 to Overwatch. Entering target area. No contact. Rusk responded from the ridge, her voice calm. Overwatch copies. Maintain schedule. 30 minutes later, their second check crackled, but still held together. Checkpoint secured. Moving to grid 47, Charlie 2. No visible threats. Then 45 minutes in static. Maris's voice broke through, distorted, panicked. Echo to Overwatch. Something's can't identify. And then nothing. Rusk tried every channel, primary, backup, emergency. All dead. The only sound was the hiss of empty air and the low whisper of wind through stone. She raised her binoculars. At first, everything looked unchanged: boulders, sparse brush, the same lifeless valley. But then her trained eye caught them shadows that didn't belong. Shapes pressed tight to rock, perfectly still. Fighters hidden in plain sight, covering every approach. And down in the scar, she saw them, the SEALs, not advancing, not retreating. Weapons lowered, shoulders sagging with the unbearable weight of inevitability. Chief Maris stood in the open, rifle hanging loose. Around him, his men emerged from cover the same way. They weren't fighting anymore. They were surrendering to an enemy no one could see. Rusk lowered the binoculars. Quietly, she unzipped her rucksack. What she pulled out wasn't the kit of an observer. It was the kit of a hunter. A compact suppressed rifle, a sidearm scarred with use, a harness that had clearly been worn in places where survival was far from guaranteed. She loaded each weapon with a speed and precision that came from muscle memory carved deep over decades. No request for orders, no call for permission. She simply stood, slung the rifle over her shoulder, and started walking, not down into the scar where the SEALs were trapped, but up the opposite ridge into terrain no one sane would attempt. Because Lieutenant Commander Ardan Rusk had seen this kind of battlefield before, and she knew the only way to win was to stop playing by the enemy's rules. The eastern ridge of the scar was a fortress built by nature itself. Loose stone, jagged climbs, and hidden approaches, perfect for ambush, perfect for control. For 6 months, this ground had belonged to the enemy. But now one woman was climbing it alone. Rusk moved with ruthless efficiency, every step measured, every shadow used for concealment. She wasn't charging in desperation, she was hunting. The first position came into view, a shallow depression behind boulders, perfect overwatch of the valley. A sniper lay prone, eye pressed to his scope, fully focused on the SEALs below. Rusk approached from above. One suppressed shot center mass. He never made a sound. She was moving again before his body went still. The second nest was a cave invisible from the valley floor, but it offered sweeping fire lines across Echo Squad's approach. 2 fighters inside murmuring about the Americans as if they were already dead. Rusk slid a grenade from her harness, pulled the pin, and held it for 3 long seconds before rolling it inside. She pressed flat to the rock as the explosion thundered, choking dust and smoke pouring from the entrance. When it cleared, the cave was silent. The third position was the worst. A sniper's perch in a natural chimney, giving 360 degrees of vision. To reach it, she had to cross open ground, exposed from every angle. No choice. She sprinted, rifle raised, hard hammering, but steady. The sniper spotted her swinging his weapon. He was trained fast, deadly, but Rusk was faster. 3 rounds while running, precise and controlled. His rifle dropped before he could fire a shot. From below, Echo Squad froze. The valley had been silent for nearly an hour, pressing them into surrender. But now gunfire cracked across the ridges. A muffled explosion rumbled like distant thunder. Dust sifted down from the cliffs, coating their gear. Santos pressed his back hard against the rock. What the hell is happening up there? Nobody answered. They all knew the scar's ridges were a death sentence, unreachable, untouchable. Yet the impossible was unfolding right above them. Kowalski's voice wavered. Sounds like someone's cutting through them. A younger SEAL whispered, "Did command send another squad?" Maris shook his head, jaw tight. "No, we'd know. No one else was cleared." Another blast shook the valley. Silence followed, heavier than before. The men exchanged glances, confusion, disbelief, and something worse, shame. They were SEALs trained for the impossible. Yet here they were, rifles lowered, waiting for the end. And someone they had dismissed as nothing more than an observer, was tearing through the enemy's fortress alone. Maris muttered through clenched teeth, anger and awe battling in his voice. God damn it. She's doing our fight for us. Then the radio crackled alive, Rusk's voice slipping through calm and cold. Echo 1, continue mission. Opposition is being neutralized. Neutralized by who Santos demanded. A pause. Then calm as ever I am. For a moment, not a single SEAL moved. Then another explosion rolled across the ridge, followed by a burst of rifle fire. Silence fell again, but this time it was a silence the Americans owned. Qualification sufficient, Rusk's voice came back. Echo 1. You are clear to advance. Grid 47, Charlie 3 is secure. Maris's eyes widened. That grid was where their missing men, Martinez and Chen, were last tracked. Echo 1 copies, he said, voice sharp with urgency. Moving to 47, Charlie 3. It took Echo Squad 20 tense minutes to reach Grid 47, Charlie 3. Weapons raised, eyes darting across every shadow, every crevice. They expected an ambush. Instead, they found a shallow cave, and inside 2 battered but breathing men. Martinez and Chen, alive, barely. Their wounds told a brutal story, 3 days of captivity used as bait to lure rescuers into the Scar's killing ground. The enemy had planned to keep repeating this trap until no one dared come again, but that plan had just been shattered. Maris knelt beside Chen, pressing a hand to his pulse. We've got you, brother. You're going home. Overhead, the valley was eerily silent. For the first time in months, the Scar wasn't a predator waiting to devour them. It was empty. Santos lifted his radio. Overwatch, this is Echo 1. Martinez and Chen recovered. Request immediate medevac. Static, then Rusk's voice cool as ever. Coordinates locked. Extraction inbound. Minutes later, the distant thump of rotors grew louder. The medevac birds swept in low dust, exploding around the landing zone. One by one, the wounded and the weary were loaded aboard. Echo Squad climbed in after them, disbelief etched on their faces. They'd entered expecting death. Instead, they were leaving with their brothers alive. And then there was her. Rusk sat in the back of the helicopter, a field dressing wrapped around her shoulder, streaks of blood across her uniform, hers and not hers. She didn't speak, just sat upright, breathing steady, watching the valley shrink beneath them. Finally, Maris couldn't hold it in. He leaned across the cabin. Ma'am, I have to ask, what's your actual background? Her eyes met his. They were tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much and carried it silently. Her answer was clipped final. Classified. Santos pressed. So you're not logistics, are you? She turned back to the window, the wind catching her words as if she were speaking to herself more than them. I was logistics, for operations that don't officially exist. It was the only explanation she gave, and the only one they needed, because the kind of logistics that could clear an entire valley of enemy fighters wasn't the kind that moved supplies. It was the kind that removed obstacles with precise, overwhelming violence. The official report read like any other Echo Squad successfully recovered 2 missing operators after unexpected tactical developments forced enemy withdrawal. No mention of who or what caused those developments. No recognition of the lone figure who turned the Scar from a graveyard into a battle finally won. By morning, Lieutenant Commander Ardan Rusk was gone. Her quarters cleared paperwork, filed travel orders processed as if she had never set foot at FOB Halverson. To the record, she didn't exist, but not everyone forgot. On the Operations Center bulletin board next to mission photos, someone pinned a black patch stitched with a jagged valley outline. Beneath it, one word in gray thread, Rusk. No rank, no unit, no explanation. Just quiet acknowledgement from those who knew. Chief Maris kept that patch for the rest of his deployment. When younger operators asked about it, he would only say, "It belonged to someone who taught me that assumptions can get you killed. The most dangerous person in the room isn't always the one you expect." And in the Scar itself, the wind still swept through the empty enemy positions. They had abandoned the ground they once believed unbreakable. Because sometimes the trap you think you've set for others is the one that destroys you. Rusk had proved something that every warrior should remember, that courage doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it walks in quietly, clipboard in hand, and changes the battlefield before anyone realizes what's happening. Because the best weapon is often the one the enemy never sees coming. And sometimes all it takes is one person who refuses to accept that a fight can't be won. Months later, new squads rotated into Fob Halverson. The scar was no longer a whispered death sentence. Patrols walked its edge with wary confidence, knowing the trap had been broken. But whispers remained not about strategies or maps, but about her. The woman who walked into the kill zone with nothing but a rucksack and walked out, leaving silence behind. In dim-lit chow halls over mugs of bitter coffee, the story traveled. She wasn't SEAL. She wasn't even supposed to be armed. One woman cleared more positions than 3 teams combined. She vanished the next day. Just gone. The patch Maris had kept made its rounds too. Black cloth gray, stitching a valley's jagged outline, and one word Rusk. No explanation offered, none needed. To those who saw it, it meant survival. It meant never underestimating the quiet one in the room. Young operators leaned in to hear the story again and again, eyes wide. Veterans just nodded because they understood the world is full of people hiding sharp edges beneath ordinary covers. And somewhere out there, no one knew where Ardan Rusk moved on. Another mission, another name, another battlefield where she would arrive with nothing but logistics credentials and leave behind silence, wreckage, and lives saved. Legends don't need recognition. They don't need medals. They just need someone to remember. And at Fob Halverson, every man who walked out of the scar carried her memory like a weapon sharpened by truth. That courage doesn't announce itself. It simply acts. So here's the question. Have you ever underestimated someone only to discover they were the one who turned everything around? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story reminded you that true power often hides in plain sight, hit like, subscribe, and share it. More hidden hero stories are waiting right here. Until tomorrow, remember the wolf never announces itself to the sheep.